Test, test, test. We'd like to start the day's graduation and talk. If everyone could sit down, no one moves. Week after week, my TRs get worse and worse. Watch this. All right, everybody sit down. See? Some people got up. Oh. Let's see, who's standing? Up there. Yeah, sure. Okay, Virginia, Victoria, sit down. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 70th consecutive. Can you hear me? What? Okay. It's nice to see a lot of new people. The event today is going to be relatively short because it gets cold real fast. We have some graduates. We have Harvey's glibness. We have David's talk. Last week we had Lane play some wonderful music for us. But this week there's no music. Isn't that delightful? There's a new AAC in Tucson. Yay. And we had a call from Tucson just a couple of hours ago to make sure that we announced here the very first AA6 graduate is Dana Parrish. So he'll get this tape, and let's give a hand to Dana Parrish. What's that? Good God, that's right, it is in Houston. Very well done, Harvey. Yeah, Houston's nice. So does everyone have that now? We're getting a news center started in Houston. We got our first graduate there. It wasn't Tucson. Yeah, who cares what happens in Tucson, right? No. Let's see, who do we have here today? We have the amazing Tomasi brothers all the way from Mexico City. Okay, we have a a lovely Russian gentleman here from where most Russians are from, Australia. This is, where's Nick? We have let's see, there's some Aussies here. There's John. Who else? What? Oh yeah, Will. And from LA we have Reuben Hart. Can you beat that? You're a nice looking group, and here's a list of this week's graduates. As soon as I get this together. This week at the AAC in Santa Barbara we had Donna Day completed Advanced Ability 3. Jenny Sloan completed Advanced Ability 3. Jenny? Ron Dickens completed Solo Course, Advanced Ability 1. Ron Dickens. Dan Wilson completed his drug handling, and Dan Wilson went clear, and Dan Wilson also completed Ability 0. Yay. Christy Cameron completed her DCSI course. Lane Cameron completed his DCSI course and his Advanced Ability 5 DRD. Yay, Lane. Drew Finley completed Brightness Rundown. Rory Jones, Ability Straight Wire, and Drug Handling. Dale tomorrow completed ability straight wire, and ability 0, and ability 1. Yay, Dale. And Diane Lekakos Phillips completed advanced ability 5. So that's this week's graduates. Hey. Does anyone want to come up and give a short win? I forgot to coerce someone. Any volunteers? Okay. Seeing as that's happening, let's just bring on David. Okay, it's time for the talk.
Hi. Well, let's see, where are we up to in this series? Somebody said 68. That wasn't a good year. Well, today I'm going to start talking about a different year than 68. Talk about 75. That way I get to end the series sooner. Now, anyway, from last week I was talking about a period of time in the early 70s when I was doing my technical internships on flag under LRH, and I think I pretty much covered most of that. In 75, that was the year that the ship, or the people on the flagship, moved from the ship to America. And I thought I might just start out by telling you some of the things that occurred during that move. We were in the islands. We were in Curacao, was the island we were in at the time, which is just north of South America in the Caribbean. And it was decided that everybody was going to leave the ship and go off to America. And so within a very short space of time, or a fairly short space of time, we had to pack everything up, and we were divided into 3 groups, basically, 3 groups of people. One group went to Miami, another group went to Washington, D.C., and another group went to New York. The management people went to New York and set up the management unit in New York that ran the orgs during this move, and then the rest of the people, in which I was included, went to a place in Florida called Daytona and set up in a motel and started delivering auditing and training in Daytona to FCCIs. We'd been doing that on the ship. We had FCCIs coming to the ship, and so we flew off and set up in a motel in Daytona to continue those services. And we stayed in Daytona for a period of a very few months, and then everybody moved from Daytona down to Clearwater, where the FSO is today. During that, that whole thing was done in somewhat typical Sea Org style, in that it was quite a loud move. It was announced fairly quick, well, it was announced that the move was going to happen, and then suddenly it had to happen a lot faster than what had been predicted. So there were quite a lot of changing orders about what people were to do, what they were to pack up and take with them, and then the next day what they should unpack and not take with them, and the next day repack and take with them, and so on. And it ended up something like that we were to pack, I think we were supposed to pack 2 suitcases and the essential materials that we needed in order to be able to go on post virtually the next day on arrival and be able to continue operating. And nobody was quite sure whether that was so or not. So various of the staff arrived in Daytona in various conditions of preparedness or otherwise. I think some people's idea of what they needed for Daytona was swimsuits and beach towels. which I think was a wise choice. And other people brought the bare essentials of their posts. I remember we were told that we didn't have to worry about bringing PC folders because somebody else was taking care of that. And we later found out that they took care of that by packing them into trunks and putting them in storage in a warehouse for 6 months. So we arrived in Daytona and started trying to find out where various things had gone to. And because some of the people went to Washington and some went to Miami, and most of these things are done, you realize, with a great measure of secrecy for security reasons. And a lot of the crew left the ship and got on a plane not knowing where they were going to go. So there were people milling around in airports like in Miami and in Washington, waiting for somebody to contact them or something. And I remember one group in Washington, finally somebody had heard there'd been a breach of security on the ship, and somebody had overheard somebody mentioning something about Daytona. So there were a group of people in the Washington airport, and one of them had heard this thing about Daytona, although he wasn't supposed to have known, so he was enterprising enough to go charter a bus, and they all got on the bus and drove to Daytona and found out that they'd come to the right place. Anyway, over a period of about 3 weeks, various people started, various of the staff started showing up in Daytona as they found out that's where they were going to. And then we got operating in Daytona, and we had, there'd been a lot of promotion, a lot of people arrived for auditing and for training. And it was actually very pleasant in Daytona, and I feel one of the major reasons for that was because the Flag Bureau, or FB as it was called, was sent to New York. And without the benefits of management, we seemed to do pretty well. And I think things tended to get over-organized from time to time in those days. Anyway, we set up in Daytona, and one of the things that had to be handled later was the fact that because we were so far removed from management, things became what they called lax. We took an hour off each day to go swimming on the beach. And interestingly enough, although that was considered to be counter-intention towards statistics, the statistics were actually very good at Daytona, and people seemed to be able to manage to get an hour's swimming time on the beach and do well on post. In fact, they seemed to do better. So the moral of the story is, sometimes laxness seems to be better. Anyway, so we worked at Daytona for a while, and it was very pleasant there. And then after we'd been there for about a month, all the crew by then knew that LRH was living in the hotel next door to the motel we were living in. But they also knew that we weren't supposed to know that he was living in the hotel next door. And so whenever he came out of the hotel and walked around outside, they used to tell each other, that he was out there, and we used to watch him from the balcony. And we also used to pretend that we, didn't know that he was there because we weren't supposed to know. And that way, everything stayed calm because security hadn't been broken. Now, during this, he decided to start what was called at the time the Special Rundown, which was a piece of technical research that he was doing. And it was later called, in the FSO, it was later called the New Vitality Rundown, or NVRD. Anyway, this is the main topic for today. I didn't want to talk about the beach in Daytona. But the main topic for today is about this special rundown that LRH researched in late '75. And what it consisted of was a discovery that if a person's PDS or PTS, he invariably has problems with the person that he's PTS to, and it had been noted in the past that if a person's audited sufficiently on the problems that he has with that person, that sometimes not only the PC gets better, but also sometimes the other person that he's having trouble with seems to undergo a change, even though the person is at a remotely different place. And this particular phenomenon had been observed over the years, but had never been isolated as to what exactly caused that. In the past, it had seemed more like a haphazard or coincidental result. And so LRH set out to try and produce this result at will by isolating the factors that caused it. And there was a fair amount of research done on earlier auditing that had taken place on people where that occurred, which I participated in by looking up all of the information in these various folders and trying to determine what had been run on people just prior to this result occurring. And we isolated in this research, isolated what the various factors were as best as possible, and I sent all that information to LRH, and then he started, he collected up a half a dozen or so cases of people who were PTS to somebody, and started CSing them and running these various processes and procedures in order to see whether that produced the result or not. And he, at that time, he started coming over to the motel where we were staying, and there was a special group of auditors selected, and I was the CS for that group of auditors, and we piloted or did the research auditing for the special rundown, and we would audit, or the PCs would be audited each day, and I'd CS the folders, and then later that day LRH would come over and we'd all gather together and he'd look over the folders, and then he'd give us a lecture on what he'd observed in the folders, and a lecture on the theory and technique so far on the rundown as it was being developed. And of course that was very interesting and very exciting to watch the rundown grow as it was being developed. And that took place over a period of about 3 weeks, after which he felt that the research was complete, and we had a procedure outlined, which, as I say, was at that time was called the special rundown, for lack of any other name for it. It was a rundown, and rather than use some other name that already belonged to something else, it was called the special rundown, until some people came up with a name for it, which was later the new vitality rundown. Anyway, he used to come over each day and give us a lecture on it and look over the folders. And I mentioned the security thing before. He was living in the hotel next door, but so that we wouldn't know where he was, he'd be driven out of the hotel in the car, and he'd go the opposite way up the street, round the block, and come into the motel from the opposite direction. And the lectures were generally in the late afternoon, but we never knew exactly what time he was going to arrive. But we found it very easy to keep track of when he'd be there, because somebody used to stand out on the balcony around about that time and see when the car drove the opposite way up the street, and then we'd know that he'd be there in about 2 minutes. So anyway, that went on, and the research on the special rundown was completed, and then shortly after that we all moved off from the motel in Daytona down to the Fort Harrison Hotel in Clearwater, and moved in there, and the FSO, as it's called, or Flag Service Org as such, got underway from there. And it basically started off with the announcement of this new rundown, the new Vitality Rundown, which all although it was promoted very heavily at the time as something that everybody should do, was actually primarily a specialized remedy action for people who had a PTS condition that didn't resolve with other PTS handlings. And the basic principle of that particular rundown is that you audit, if the person is PTS, you audit him on problems and valences that he has relating to the person he's PTS to a point not where the PC has had a certain amount of gain, but to a point where the other person suddenly ceases to be antagonistic to him, at which point the rundown's completed. And I find that a very interesting phenomena, technically, because it shows several factors. One is that in terms of the case of the person being audited, it shows that everything is not being caused totally by that person. Some of it's being caused from somewhere else. But also, vice versa, it shows that if you bring about a change in the person you're auditing, that can also produce a result somewhere else, in another person, which is quite an exciting thing. And it demonstrates validity to various basic ideas, or gives further validity to various basic ideas, such as that we are basically beings, and that there is such a thing as cause and effect, not only on an individual basis that a person can cause effects himself, but that there is an interrelationship between cause and effect between one being and another being. And I guess as an extension of that principle, there's an idea that I've often heard many Scientologists express, and sometimes LRH has mentioned the possibility from time to time over the years, that if the idea that if enough people got enough case gain, that there must come a point where there'd been enough charge removed and enough case gain created generally on enough people that it would have an effect on all the rest of the people that hadn't as yet had any auditing or anything at all. Like some kind of a general tone rise on the whole planet or something to that effect, which I think is quite likely possible. And in wrapping this up, I would want to make a point that if we were going to bring that about, that one of the obvious things to do would be to bring about as much case gain on as many people as possible in order to achieve that. And I think that is occurring these days with a very large number of independent centers and independent individuals and practitioners starting up who are getting a lot of auditing done. And I think that's the most significant thing that's going on currently across the world. Is it's not so much that people are well, let me comment a little bit on the last few years. People have often expressed a lot of protest about things that they didn't agree with that were coming down from various management people, which is basically like a struggle or a fight of some kind, a protest. But I don't think that's the main thing that's going on these days. The main concentration these days is that people are getting on with doing as much auditing and training as they possibly can. And in a way, that's far better than what was going on, say, a year ago, because the various actions that people took a year ago of saying no to things that they disagreed with and so on was simply for the purpose of being able to get on with what they wanted to do, which was to get on with auditing and training and making case gains for themselves and making case gains for other people. And that seems to be becoming increasingly frequent over the last few months, and I think that's the real motto of current times, is that it's funny, but 1984 was supposed to be the, I guess, year of horror and various things associated with the book on the subject. And to a large degree it did start out that way. Or we entered 1984 that way, but as 1984 is now drawing to a close, we're actually well out of that, and we're actually, believe it or not, and I'm sure you do, we're actually into a scene these days where there's a tremendous amount of auditing going on and a lot of case gain happening, and we're basically all achieving what we set out to achieve. So I think we're all doing pretty good, and thank you.
Thank you, David. I won't tell you about the winds in Tucson. I'll tell you about... I want to invite you all to our second annual Christmas party, which is December 16th, so you have to all come. It's going to be here in Santa Barbara at the El Paseo restaurant, which is an enormous, wonderful old place. So put that down on your calendars, December 16th, okay? Thanks for coming. There's hot coffee, and you're welcome to stay a bit and chat. Bye-bye.